Good morning, everybody. Great to be sitting here in the war room, temporarily holding the chair held by Steve Bannon, who's out there fighting for you and me, and we're deeply appreciative for it. I am deeply appreciative to have my friend Alex Epstein on the line to talk about what I refer to as energy freedom. There is probably no better voice out there for explaining human flourishing and the extent to which the average American, particularly now, benefits from expansive energy freedom and the ability to afford energy and get the products that come from it. Alex has been doing this for a long time. He and I have been working together for, almost a decade, I think. And I'm deeply appreciative to have him on. How are you, brother?
Doing great. Looking forward to the discussion.
Well, great to have you here. Congratulations. You're a new dad, right? A couple months ago, I think. And
yeah,
congratulations on that. Mom doing well?
7.5 weeks in. Yeah, great. It's a lot of fun.
Well, that's great. Well, look, let's just jump right in. We just had EJ in talking about the extent to which the sort of regulatory environment is crushing the American economy. And I want to get in, zero in on what we've been seeing out of the Biden-Harris administration and what we're seeing currently in terms of the regulatory impact of all of the stuff going on energy, right? We're talking about the tailpipe rule, which is going to mandate EVs by 2032. We're talking about the Inflation Reduction Act, where you've got subsidies. And one of the things I want the audience to hear from you is, like, you're not coming at this from a particular political agenda necessarily, as much as just speaking truth and speaking truth about what it means for the average human being, right? That humans flourish when we have abundant available energy. This administration has been restricting the availability of abundant, reliable energy, and rather than allowing us to flourish with available gas, I know you're big on nuclear. Can you talk a little bit about that, about what that means for the average American family, how the American dream is getting restricted by pursuit of this, what is in fact a political agenda, and rather what we could do instead with true energy freedom?
Sure. I mean, I think a key aspect of the American dream is just having a certain level of prosperity. So the idea that, well, if you work hard, you do the right things, you can sort of fairly easily support a family. You can do work that you like, but you can also have recreational time. You can do all sorts of different things with your social network and community. And what people need to realize is this kind of life, there's a lot of things undercutting it right now, but you have to realize this is a fairly new thing. And it comes from prosperity, and fundamentally prosperity comes from freedom, because freedom allows us to use our ideas to figure out how to become more productive and prosperous. But to be a little more specific, prosperity comes from energy freedom, because energy freedom is the ability to innovate and create in the realm of energy. And energy is machine food or machine calories. So energy is what we feed our machines that make us productive and prosperous. Without machines, life is terrible, because the world is a pretty inhospitable place. Human beings aren't very productive. And so we just have manual labor. So the key division between a poor society and a prosperous society, besides freedom versus non-freedom, is having machines that are producing a lot of value for us. So you can think of it, when energy is cheaper, everything that we produce with machines, which means everything is cheaper. When energy is more expensive, everything is more expensive. This is why you've seen a lot of the inflation be energy driven. And it's don't think of energy just in terms of what you pay for gasoline, what you pay for your power bill, what you pay for your heating bill. Those are very significant. But think of it as this literally affects the cost of every single thing you do. So when you see your food prices go up, you should ask yourself, well, is it more expensive to feed tractors? Is it more expensive to feed trucks? Is it more expensive to grow, the actual feed for livestock? Is it more expensive to refrigerate things? And if you start to see the whole world in terms of machines that our productivity and prosperity depend on, and then energy is the input that makes those machines cheaper or more expensive, you start to see the price of energy determines the price of everything. And when you experience economic struggle, you can bet that bad energy policy, and particularly restrictions on the freedom to produce and consume energy, you can be sure that that's a big cause of your problems.
So So, Alex, on that point, let's be kind of blunt here. I'm not asking you to be political per se, but is it advisable, understanding what you just said, is it advisable for us to have the government come in and pick winners and losers and provide, in the case of the Inflation Reduction Act, $1 trillion of subsidies, massively distorting the market in favor of wind and solar, which are more inefficient and unreliable, and distorting the price point that doesn't allow for the context of reliable natural gas or reliable nuclear. And similarly, the tailpipe rule, which will distort the market to say that, well, you're going to go do assembly lines to produce nothing but EVs. Would you agree that those two policies are particularly damaging when it comes to the ability to drive prices down and have prosperity, economic growth, and be able to have the American dream be achieved?
Yeah, definitely those policies are really bad. I'd say one thing about not being political in terms of not having a party affiliation or supporting particular candidates or anything like that is I can say that like the policies that are being pursued under the current administration are just totally beyond the pale and should never be considered. My criticism is in general that both parties are woefully inadequate when it comes to energy. Now, I think EJ mentioned the previous Trump administration did a lot of good on energy, and that is they did do a lot of good on energy, probably on that issue, more than any president in many, many decades, maybe even generations. And one of the key things that they did was, which needs to be done much more, is they were particularly focused on regulation, but what I would call restrictions or shackling. So you mentioned in particular the IRA and the subsidies. So I think of it as the government intervenes and ruins our economy in two basic ways. It can subsidize things, so it takes our money to pay for things that are not cost effective, but it can shackle them. It restricts our freedom to produce things, period. And the shackles are the most destructive thing. So for example, in the 70s, we had this huge opportunity with oil in Alaska, but a Republican, actually, Richard Nixon, among doing many bad things to the economy, after the Santa Barbara oil spill, panicked and shut down the pipeline that was going to be built to Alaska that, by the way, would have brought as much oil on the market as Saudi Arabia took off the market during the embargoes. So it's like when you shackle the economy, that is the worst possible thing. You mentioned nuclear. We used to have a prosperous, cheap nuclear industry. We destroyed it not by subsidies, but by making it basically impossible to build nuclear because of a bunch of pseudoscientific ideas that basically say any amount of radiation is dangerous. So we basically can't allow nuclear to exist without impossibly expensive restrictions. So I would think of it as the number one thing is to unshackle energy and then to desubsidize energy. So I said these recent things are just beyond the pale, because what a proper administration should have done following the Trump administration was say, great, we made some progress, but we need radically more progress to use the current term, which I like, unleash American energy. Like there's so much more that we can do in terms of removing irrational regulations. There's so much more we can do in terms of unleashing American oil and natural gas. There's so much more we can do in terms of having affordable, reliable electricity. There's so much more that we can do in terms of nuclear, but instead what they'd said is, I guarantee you we're going to end fossil fuel. That was one of Biden's campaign slogans. He ran with somebody who pledged to ban fracking, who was one of the co-sponsors of the Green New Deal. And what you see with this administration is an administration that does not value energy. That's the key. Some people hate energy. A lot of the people who influence them actually hate energy. We could talk about that. I don't think Biden or Harris hates energy. They just don't really care. What they care about is the side effects of using energy, particularly what they'll call climate change. So the climate impacts of putting more CO2 in the atmosphere. And fundamentally, their focus is let's protect the earth from human industry versus let's use human industry to benefit human life. And that's a very big philosophical difference. And it's a very important one. We need our elected officials to recognize that industry is a crucial force for human life, including human health. And the idea that you're going to shackle industry and you're going to claim that it benefits human health, that's just as logical as if you shackled the caveman from using fire and say, hey, it's for your health because you won't have any smoke. Yeah, you won't have as much smoke because you won't live. You won't be able to cook your food. You won't be able to heat your life. So we need a fundamental philosophical change from anti-industry to pro-industry, which ultimately leads to anti-human to pro-human. And that needs to be manifested in a whole bunch of specific unshackling, which we could talk about because my group has been working on a blueprint for that.
Alex, I appreciate you very much. How can people hear more about you? At energytalkingpoints.com. I encourage people to go back and look at that website. Alex, where are you on social media?
Yeah, at Alex Epstein on Twitter, at Alex Epstein Energy on Instagram. And yeah, that website, energytalkingpoints.com, make sure to sign up for the free weekly newsletter. There, we're just putting out summer talking points on things like gasoline prices, electricity prices, summer heat, et cetera. And our blueprint, which is called the Energy Freedom Platform, we're going to be rolling that out. So just follow along at energytalkingpoints.com, sign up for the newsletter, and you'll be good to go.
Alex, thanks for all you do. Thanks for standing up for energy freedom. Thanks for joining us today, brother. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Chip. Talk to you soon. Bye.